everyone. So now I'm going to just go over some of your comments. I won't be able to cover all of them, I'm afraid, but I'll just cover some of them, and then those I haven't covered I'll try and come back to another time. I have also replied to some of your comments in the chat as well, so if I haven't covered yours in here, I will have tried to have replied to it in the chat, so just so you know, I'm not ignoring anyone. So here are some of the comments. I'll just go through some of them. So one of you says, "You're quite right that if you had problems with cooking, diet, you would be much more likely to get help as it is regarded as such a fundamental matter." And you gave the example of, say, someone who, has problems with diet and maybe overweight and stuff like that. And safety also rings alarm bells for them. For example, say if I'd left the gas or the taps on, and if I know concept of food hygiene, then I might be more likely to get the support I need, basically. The root problem is their belief that if someone can live on their own without having accidents or complaints from family or neighbours, that they don't need support. But they need to provide support for psychological well-being as well, not just, physical well-being. So yes, I agree with you, but I would also add to that in my own case, I have had accidents. Basically, to give one example, there was a plumbing incident where I had a leak beneath my sink. This was mentioned to the social worker, by the way, but it still obviously hasn't changed his way of thinking about, the fact that I can't have a cleaner. But there was a leak beneath my sink. I didn't tell my dad because I didn't think it was a problem. It didn't kind of register. The plumber came to do the boiler, to maintain the boiler, which is done, once a year to give it a service check. And I hadn't told my dad about the leak until after the plumber had been, not realising that the person doing the boiler could also have sorted out the leak. Okay, my dad then came in while I was out to do some cleaning for me, and he noticed the extent of the problem, and he went really, really stressed because basically the leak was really big, and I had to wash up in a bath for a period of time because otherwise I would have flooded the kitchen essentially. And then my dad had to call out another plumber for next week, and we had to pay extra because I hadn't clicked that the person checking the boiler could have dealt with a leak, and I hadn't told my dad soon enough. So another plumber came out and he fixed it. But that's just an example. So actually, accidents do happen like that, and they do put a lot of strain on family in my case, and complaints from family. In this case, my dad got really, really, really stressed. They don't happen that often, but when they do happen, it's really, really stressful. In terms of neighbours, there aren't really any complaints from neighbours apart from my garden. I can't maintain the garden. So my dad does that for me. Obviously, when my dad's no longer around, there could be potential complaints from neighbours because, I don't know how to maintain it, so I also really need a gardener. That's the other thing. I should be able to use direct payments on a gardener. Another thing, I'm not going to be able to afford to spend my benefits on both a cleaner. I'm not going to be able to afford to spend my disability benefits on both a cleaner and a gardener on top of everything else. I should be able to get this from social services. It's absolutely disgusting. But I agree with you completely that they do also need to provide support for psychological well-being as well, and they don't understand issues around energy and executive functioning, and they just don't get it. Another one of you says that you're very frustrated that you live with your parents as you can't live independently, and yet you are considered very high functioning. It's funny the way the word high functioning is bandied around so often like that. I would say that if you can't live independently and as you're living with your parents, you're hardly that high functioning, you know what I mean? You've got significant support challenges. So I personally wouldn't say you're that high functioning. I would say maybe you're a bit like me, you can function really well in some areas, but clearly in other areas you can't function. So it's strange the way people automatically assume you're high functioning, I guess because you're verbal and, as you say, you can read and write. Being able to read, as you put it, being able to read or write at high level makes people think there's no way I can be this disabled, even though and that's the same with me because I can read and write well. Again, people often don't get the extent of my disability. So you say that even though I don't have severe autism, autism is so disabling that you are significantly disabled by just a mild form. Again, I hope you don't mind, but I'd query as well to what extent your autism is indeed mild, because if you are seriously disabled by it, then it's got to be pretty severe. I mean, obviously, like, the word severe is obviously all relative, you know, and I guess what you're saying is you're not severe, you know, in the sense of, say, someone who can't talk and has an intellectual disability is severe, and yet, if you are disabled by it to that extent, it's hardly mild, I would say. I hope you don't mind me saying that, because it sounds like you are pretty disabled by it from what you're saying. And you make a point that a significant majority of autistics rely on their parents through adulthood. And you make a sort of point that it's almost like a ticking time bomb, you know, that when these parents are no longer around, people who are now like in their 20s and 30s relying on their parents, what's going to happen to them? And you say you really hate the whole push for unpaid help from your social network as an alternative to paid services, as autistic people are socially disabled. They're the least likely group to have friends. Indeed. That's the point I made earlier as well. Unpaid help, that's what it is. It's the transferring of labour onto unpaid carers, who now basically do, you know, that's really wrong. These are unpaid carers, they don't get paid, and it's a way in which Tories like to outsource support so that they don't have to provide, so that the government doesn't have to provide it. You know, it's like the carers are doing what should be done by the state, and it puts a strain on families, and it's just not healthy, because you want the support delivered by people who are, it's just not, what am I trying to say? It's just not healthy, you know, to expect family to take on all that labour. It's like a burden. It's really wrong. And if they all dropped down dead or like went on strike and refused to do it, then we'd have like an absolute emergency on our hands, and then I guess the government would be forced to do something, or maybe not. Maybe they'd still find excuses. And you also make a point that you'd also like to see the people who push for this, that's to say, unpaid help from social network, you'd also like to see the people who push for this actually live by it after asking their friends for help with extremely personal tasks for a month. I think this would end rather quickly. And another one of you says that ridiculous reasons such as you've self-published a book, you like to paint and do a vlog were used against you to deny compensation for your PTSD, and that we're not allowed to have hobbies as disabled people. You know, I hear this a lot. This whole strengths-based stuff is used to deny support. You have to be really careful. Like, I'm so wishing I had not gone on about not having, because I said to the social worker, I kept going on about there not being a health and safety issue. Like, I really should not have done that. I did it because I'm a little bit worried about social workers. Like, I never know what their agenda is, and I think also being autistic, I struggle to understand what to talk about in certain situations. Like, obviously it would have been more in my interest to have gone on about the negatives. And I think maybe if I was neurotypical, I would have understood that it was not in my best interest to go on so much about what I can do, because I don't have that kind of nous naturally, like how to, like I think neurotypicals know more like what to say in order to get what you need, like support-wise. I mean, I am learning. My problem is that I'm honest to a fault, and I tend to basically, if anything though, I tend to actually overemphasise the positives. I think it might be because, I don't know, it's not nice talking about negatives, is it? So, you know, I maybe did go on a little bit too much to the social worker about what I'm good at, and emphasising that there's no risks and that there's no health and safety issues. Oh my God, I should not have done that because it's cost me what I need. Because of course he doesn't know the whole context. Like, it wasn't quite true when I said there's no clutter, because actually there is clutter. It's just that, like, I didn't really want to kind of like emphasise that, because part of me was worried that if I had mentioned those sort of things, that the social workers might come round. You know, like you hear about it in the news, because I don't really trust social workers. Like, they might come round and like report you or something, because the questions were really invasive. So I almost went out of my way to like prove there was no risk, and that's now gone against me. I've learnt my lesson. And what I should have said, I shouldn't have just simply said, I can wash up, like that's a great thing. Don't worry about me, I can wash up sort of thing. I should not have said that. I should have instead said, I can wash up, but it takes me a really long time and is really exhausting. That's what I should have said. I know now for future, because I did not represent myself well. It's a bit like when I went to that first benefits review with my mum ages ago, and they asked the question, can you go shopping? And I said, yeah, I can go shopping. My mum was kicking me, not literally, beneath the table, because it wasn't the whole picture, and I was just being really positive. I was treating it like a job interview, basically. You know, like you're always told, like, job interviews, be all positive, sell yourself. Being autistic, I think I just really struggled to understand how this was not a job interview. You know, you have to think. So, of course, 0 points, had to go to tribunal. And, you know, that was way back. Because obviously, like, it's not as simple as can go shopping. You know, you really have to know how to answer the questions properly. And it's the same thing, actually. It's not like, oh, I can just wash up. You know, it's a bit like at the benefits review. If you said I can wash up, you get 0 points. It's the same with social services, I'm finding. You have to really know how to, like, word it in your favour. It's like about being